Welcome, everyone. This is Camille's Harem, and I have a need for weeb.
Woo! Weed or weeb?
Weeb. How many times are we going to make this dumb joke?
As many times as it takes. Hi there, everyone. Scott and Lars back to talk about the upcoming anime for winter 2025. Woo!
Woo!
And as usual, we have looked into the manga, or at least all the available manga that we could get, for a selection of the shows coming on out to let you know if, based on the manga, if this show is worth your time.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. We usually read a couple chapters in, kind of get an idea of the story, get an idea for the characters, and just see if it's going to be something we're interested in. We're going to talk about it like from our viewpoint as writers, well, as novice writers anyway, and we're going to give you a yay or nay kind of. We're really just two buds talking about anime, and this is how we're doing it on the channel.
Exactly.
We don't need to overcomplicate it.
Absolutely not. But we hope that anyone who's watching this gets some good insights into some of these stories and thinks about better for themselves if this is something that they wish to spend their time with. Because we know that all of our time is precious. There's always too much anime to consume in any one given season. So hopefully this helps you figure out what you might want to watch. And we'll start off with Solo Leveling Season 2.
I was honestly surprised with the first season how slow it went. I mean, they covered a lot of ground. They did a lot of setup for what's going on. But like the meat and potatoes of Solo Leveling is gonna start here in season 2 as we get into all of like the shadow summoning and Jinwoo building his army and all that kind of stuff. Like that's what people really think of when they think Solo Leveling, not necessarily the stuff that's going on in season 1.
As you've been talking, I've just been flexing for Swolo. So
flex those non-existent muscles.
Oh,
that's okay. I'm right there with you. I may be big in body, but I do not have muscles.
So in any case, my opinion of Solo Leveling, I call it Swolo because I found that the story just got a little bit ridiculous for me. Now then, that's just my opinion. I know that Solo Leveling has tons of big fans, and if you enjoy it, awesome. Go ahead and enjoy it. One of my big problems with Swolo, and I'm hoping that the anime can actually overcome this, and I've watched the anime to try to see this, is that we get a very good characterization for Jinwoo. And the reason why I say that is because I love overpowered characters. I really do. I know I am weird as an author who loves overpowered characters. But one of the things that makes overpowered characters to me very interesting is how motivations, backstory, personality, relationships are all recontextualized by the immense power that a character has. And Jinwoo in the beginning has an excellent backstory. We get to see him as the weakling who then becomes very strong. He has a motivation to help his sister, to help his mother. We get to see a guy that you really want to root for, the underdog. But by the end of the first season, I felt like a lot of what made Jinwoo a fun character just wasn't there anymore. In fact, he even turns down good job opportunities at first that would be really excellent for his sister and for his mother. And he's doing it because he wants to gain awesome powers solo-like. It's like he's basically just existing to live up to the name of the story. And so what I'm hoping for in season 2 is that we get better characterization for Jinwoo going forward, that we get to see these relationships that he's been slowly building really come more to the forefront, have some more stakes involved, and then that will make his OP-ness actually like work, in my opinion, way better. Mm-hmm. A guy becoming OP, in my opinion, is awesome, but it needs to be balanced out by great character development.
Yeah, I And I hope the anime does a good job of showing that. I don't know if the manhwa, at least in my opinion, from what I remember, because I read this a while back, I don't remember if it did a very good job of like really showcasing his emotions and his motivations as the story's progressing, how they change. I felt like it a lot of the time relied more on, oh, check out this cool fight or that cool fight, than it did actually like progressing character arcs for the most part. I am excited for this one because I did really enjoy like the Jeju Island arc in the manhwa, and if they can get up to the Jeju like island arc, it will be so much fun. If it goes past that, that's fine. I'm not as interested in that just because I know where it's going. But the Jeju Island arc was epic in its own right, and for me, that's all it needs to go to.
So next one that we have on our list is we have the Apothecary Diaries season 2,
which we are both ecstatic for. Like,
yes.
Apothecary Diaries, it is a very solid story with a lot of really well done, not only like world building and like historical kind of, can I say accuracy, or like historical fiction
representation. It's a great historical fiction.
Yeah. But like, you just gotta love those characters, Mao Mao and Jinchi specifically, but like all of the other characters included are so much fun, and it creates a very nuanced, like twisting melody that is just really fun to partake in. I'm so excited for this next season too, because specifically with Apothecary Diaries, that first season, all of that going on, you're getting introduced to all of these different characters. You're getting to know what the life of the emperor's harem in ancient China was like for these people, and like you get to solve all these like different interesting mysteries that's going on. But for the second season, from what I've seen in the trailer for it, all of that was built up. All of that was set up for what's going to happen in the second season. And so this second season, there's going to be some fireworks. You're going to find out some really deep stuff that's been going on in this harem for years. And I'm so excited to see it.
I'm really excited for this as well. I just rewatched through the Apothecary Diaries recently, and man, it's such a great story. Mao Mao is a fantastic lead character. I love her complexities, and I love the fact that she has some really bizarre faults and quirks to her, which when I was doing the initial review for the first season, a lot of people are all like, well, I don't like that she has these problems or these issues. I'm like, that's what makes her so great. Because she's fallible, she's silly, she does dumb things, and though she's very observant, she doesn't like. It's funny because she can observe facts. She's like Sherlock Holmes. I observe facts, but do I necessarily know people? Not always. And that's one of the things that makes Mao Mao a very interesting character, especially in her oftentimes role as a detective, is that she can pick up on all these facts, but she's not fully understanding the people who are involved. And that's always the journey that she has to go on. And so now, as you said, Scott, like we've been introduced now to this whole cast of characters, we've gotten to know them, and now we can push forward into some of the big mysteries and adventures. And because we now know these characters and we understand better, and Mao Mao herself also understands them better, this means that we can really cut to the more important, darker, weightier stuff within the story. So I'm so excited.
And like,
also, continue. Sorry.
And just something like that's kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen. Apothecary Diaries isn't afraid to look deep into the past of like what's going around the harem and like the nearby city to like showcase and show off stories that are going on. Like specifically, you've got like the whole thing with Lacan and finding out he's Mao Mao's dad and all that kind of stuff. It that's gonna really come to light. Like a lot of that stuff that's been happening in the past, specifically in the harem, is really gonna come to light in this season. There's some deep, kind of messed up, very interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah, you bring politics, relationships, a harem, and all that into schemes and everything all into the mix, and yeah, it's going to get messy. But one thing I do want to quickly say before we forget is that for each one of the reviews that we do, we are going to be hiding frogs in the videos. If you know, you know. If you don't know, anyway, what you should know is you should look for these frogs, because the first person to comment on the correct number of frogs hidden in each video will get a special illustrated frog made by Camille herself that will be dedicated to that person. And don't worry, because once one person has gotten themselves a frog, they are out of the running to make room for everyone else who wishes to have their own frog.
I love this so much. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. But you know what isn't a whole lot of fun, but maybe fun to make fun of? 100 girlfriends who really, 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 really love you.
I can't believe this is still going on. It's so cliche in manga to set up this like impossible goal for like the main character to like reach or defeat a certain amount of things or whatever. And like you're basically just setting up that you're going to have basically the same kind of arc over and over and over and over again. And this one, like, no matter how far ahead in the story you get, it's the same stuff every single time.
And my biggest complaint with this story is that it's set in a country that already has a big enough problems with its birth rates. Why is a Japanese god giving one dude 100 girls to fall in love with? That for one thing, that's already going to mess up the weekend's gene pool. But yeah, it's just the story, though, coming down to what is it about the story that's just so frustrating is that it falls into all the cliche harem tropes just again and again and again. And here's the thing is that this harem is going to be so impossibly big that whatever girl you do latch on to that you yourself as the viewer really enjoy, it's just going to be so far relegated into the background that it's just a disservice to her as a character. Like, if you're going to do a harem story, like, you want to have good relationships between all of the different people involved in that harem. You want to give them chances to be fully developed, and not just for the one arc where the MC falls in love with them, but throughout the story. And the more you add to the harem, the harder it gets. There's only a handful of stories that I know of that manage this really well.
I agree. And this is going to go back to like an old 90s anime, but I feel like the author like really wanted to make their own version of DNA squared and came up with this horrible remake. I mean, DNA squared was kind of messed up and weird in the first place, but this is worse. This is so much worse.
Yeah, I have no desire to watch this. I think I tried watching like the first episode of the first season, and because I was like, we'd read the manga, we're like, this is awful, but whatever, I'll check it out. Let's see what the anime can do. And I'm like, ugh, no, thank you.
All right, and then last of all, we're gonna have, for returning anime anyway, we have My Happy Marriage, which keeps getting better.
This is a good one.
Yeah,
this is a good one. We've kind of reached a point now where the anime will outstrip where the manga has gone. So we're now firmly in light novel territory,
which is going to be interesting. We're going to get into stuff that like a lot of like the manga readers aren't as familiar with it. And like I've read some of the light novel, not as far as this, but I've read some of the light novel, and it's really well written. Honestly, it's a good read if you want to pick that up. But Like, it's had a lot of really good world building, there's a lot of really good characters, and it just keeps building on top of itself, which a good story does. I'm really happy to see that this one's continuing.
Yeah, and what I like about this is that, so this is basically like, this is like more fantasy Japanese Cinderella. And what I like about
Mhm,
this is that we're now transitioning on over to the husband side of the family. We spent a lot of time with the girl, and getting to see just her horrible situation, how she's been lifted up and how she's transformed into such a beautiful person. How does that fare against another cold family? Though at the same time, an open family. It's very dynamic. This is going to be crazy because she's going to be thrown into a very different world than the one she's come from, and yet it will be similar, and there will be people who love her and there will be people who are going to be against her.
mhm.
And so this is going to be, I think, a very dynamic season.
I'm looking forward to it. Alright, let's get into some of these new anime. We have some really fun anime coming up, we have some really terrible anime coming up. It's it's not like knock your socks off like some seasons, but then again, I feel like winter is usually one of the weaker seasons. Like they usually save a lot of that for like spring or fall, like
Hmm.
specifically. But there's some fun ones coming out. First and foremost, Sakamoto Days is has a really fun setup. I mean, I love the trope of like the old retired assassin is still a complete badass. And this is that. I I don't know how much I'm gonna enjoy it past the first season, but the first season is probably gonna be pretty fun.
I myself have read at one point pretty far into the manga, and it got to a point where I didn't care as much about it anymore.
Mhm,
But that being said, I think that a lot of people are really going to enjoy the opening, because you've got Sakamoto, who's got such a funny and cute backstory to why he is where he is. His
mhm.
wife is precious and must be protected at all costs,
Yep.
but she also isn't a dimwit, which I
Yeah.
like. I like that she knows that he's an assassin, and so that makes for some really fun hijinks and shenanigans, especially when other characters from Sakamoto's past come into play, and so it opens very strong. The manga, in my opinion, weakens over
Mhm.
time. So we'll have to see how the anime plays out, but I think that this one will grab a lot of people's attention for the first season, and it will be a lot of fun.
Right. I definitely feel like Sakamoto Days is another one of those, stories that was like, Spy Family inspired it in some way, and led into what it is. Like, because I definitely noticed when Spy Family came out that suddenly afterwards there was a bunch of, like, spy and assassin themed kind of stories coming out as well. And Sakamoto
Mhm.
Days was one I found after that as well. And so I definitely feel like it has like it's one of those that popped out from that trend. But I think they did a really good job just like initially. Yes, it has a fun setup. It's like a fun one to read. It's more easygoing than some of the assassin ones I've seen. If you want a really good one, look into a manga by the name of Marriage Toxin. That
Yeah,
one is
yes.
fantastic. Like, has really fun rom-com elements, the, like, world building and the power setup and the fights are all phenomenal, but, like, it
And the
puts
harem is well balanced.
yes. Well, it's well balanced because, like, there's actual a lot of, like, character building. You have, like, character arcs they're going through, like, that it's grounded more in these, like, really fun, really well-built characters, and that's why it does really well in the long term. Sakamoto
Mhm.
Days kinda misses that, so it's kinda shaky when you get further into the story.
Yeah, but this first season should be great.
Mhm.
Uh, then looking to one that you and I, before we started recording, had some interesting discussions about, honey lemon soda.
I am actually really happy that we're getting a good shoujo manga animated. I feel like we're not seeing that as often anymore, and it's a shame because there's a lot of really good shoujo stories out there. In fact, some of my favorite manga are like actual shoujo stories. This one's not one of them, but I think it's a solid story in and of itself. It has a really good setup. I like the characters. It's just from reading the start of the manga though, it's kind of jumbled.
Hmm.
Like it's hard to pick up on a lot of what's going on because like one, there's so much like focus on the stream of consciousness of the main character, and it's kind of getting in the way of like actually getting to know a lot of these characters.
Yeah, so that stream of consciousness made it a little bit difficult for me to really connect with it. I do like the setup right here. If you have this girl who's coming into her first year of high school, and she was bullied back in middle school. She's of a slightly different disposition. She's slow to respond, and so people are like, "You're as emotionless as a stone." And now that she's in high school, she really does want to be a different person, but she's having a hard time doing that. And especially because her tormentors from middle school have come to the same high school as her. And you get those interactions, and they are not nice. And they are relentless at one point in the early chapters. And so when we get to meet our lemon soda guy, who pops in on the scene, he's an interesting character because he's really hard to pin down about where he really fits in all of this. But it's very clear that he does want our girl, our heroine, to be who she wants to be, to open up, because when she does open up, there's a beautiful person in there. And so I like seeing that in the story. It wasn't very well communicated to me in the manga. And I feel like this is where the anime can really overcome maybe some of the difficulties that the manga had.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like, especially that like stream of consciousness way of storytelling that Honey Lemon Soda is so focused on, I feel like that will work a lot better in an animated format with a voice actor behind it than it will with like putting it down like as a comic. Um, and so it's one of those that we'll just have to see. I'm gonna tentatively say I'm gonna like look into the first like episode or two and see how that turned out because I'm actually kind of curious to see like how they lay it out. If they do a really good job with it, this could be a really fantastic story and like kind of be up there a little bit with like Horimiya when
Hmm.
it comes to like shoujo manga. So yeah, we'll have to see. This one could be fun.
Now, one that you and I are kind of in agreement with, which is not going to be all that great, is I'm getting married to the girl I hate in my class.
Oh, this
Oh,
was a disappointment in so many ways. It was so sad.
holy
Oh man.
convoluted setup, Batman!
Why why? I mean, you're setting up enemies to lovers kind of setup. I'm like, okay, one that's already a very overused trope, but then you're throwing it in with they're forced to marry like and they are actually given a choice and like decide to go along with it. But instead of like actually trying to make the best of the situation, their characters, which they're both terrible characters, terrible people in the first
Yeah,
place, they just butt heads. Like there's no compromise. There's no willingness to actually like work together through this situation that they've been thrown
there's no
into.
chemistry.
Yeah, there's no actual chemistry. They just hate each other with a freaking passion. And like I I get the feeling that they're like building up to realizing that like that the girl's on tsundere and doesn't realize she likes the guy because like of all the blushing whenever like they interact. But I'm like, I'm not interested. Like,
Hmm.
why are you putting all this effort into like showing that she hates him? Like, they really shouldn't interact as much as they do because they actually do hate each other. Like,
Yeah,
why are they constantly butting heads? Like in a real life situation, if you hate each other and you're fighting with each other, like whenever you interact, a lot of the time they're just not gonna get close to each other. They're gonna separate, they're gonna drift apart. And really the only thing putting them into the situation is their horrible grandparents. What kind of reasoning was that? It was like, oh, we were in love as kids, but it didn't work out. But to like realize that like romance, we're putting our grandkids together.
Yeah. Well,
What?
you know what makes it even weirder is that you realize in the dialogue that the grandparents are now single. So why don't they just get together?
Well, no, they already are.
Are they together?
Yep, they already
I didn't
are.
get. See, that makes it even creepier. It makes it even worse,
Yep.
actually. Oh my gosh, the story just keeps getting worse. And here's the thing: is that as far as like bringing the kids together, or like there's so many different better ways of making this happen. Let's say
Mhm.
that they are in detention together, or they're in cram school together, or let's say that they both share a similar hobby and are reluctantly in the same club together, and the club president forces them to work together for like some amazing competition or something like that. Any
Mhm.
of those makes more sense. And as you said, Scott, it prevents them from being too close to each other. So that way they're always fighting, because all that fighting does not endear us to them at all.
No, not in the way they're doing it, at least. This is terrible. Like, this is like, and it makes me think of Nisekoi.
Oh, Nisekoi.
Yeah, that one has a similar setup, but does a much better job of pulling it off because, like, the characters, like, they don't like each other from the beginning, but, like, one, they're more well-developed characters. Their arguments are actually constructive in some form or another. And like it actually makes more sense why they're getting put together. Like they've got two rival Yakuza families. Well, they're getting married to like bond them together so they'll stop fighting and destroying the city. Like
Hmm.
that makes so much more sense than this. Like this is like you said, so convoluted and stupid.
So moving on to something a little bit better.
Oh
I may
man.
be a guild receptionist, but I'll solo any boss to clock out on time. Another
So
long-winded title, but this time actually a pretty good story.
yeah, this is a showcase in like you can take the overused tropes and still write a really good story because like this fits right into the like the overused isekai and video game fantasy esque stories that are a dime a dozen anymore. But it has some fun characters. The character motivations are real, and like you can actually like get behind some of these character motivations. You have the main character, Alina, who she's a guild receptionist. She just wants to have her normal everyday job with her normal everyday life. It doesn't matter that she's overpowered, but she ends up having to like use that sometimes because the adventurers she's working with are stupid and make her do a whole bunch of overtime she doesn't want to deal with. And so she goes and defeats the bosses so she doesn't have to work overtime, which ends
Hmm.
up backfiring on her a lot. It creates more overtime, and people find out she's overpowered and try to drag her into the adventuring world, and that is the last thing she wants.
And for me, one of the things that really works, that really makes the story work, because I actually have here in our notes that this is more of like a fun one-shot idea. I don't see how this could end up being a long-term story. I've read
Mm,
pretty far ahead in the manga, and one of the things that makes it work is that one of the guys who realizes who she is, Jade, the leader of the Silver Sword Party,
yeah.
is not a jerk, and nor is he too pushy. Like she sees him as pushy, but you realize as the story goes on, he's just a good guy. And it's kind
Hmm.
of nice just having a good guy for a change. And some of the other side characters who get brought in are either like really supportive or really interesting in their own right, or really big bastards in their own right that deserve to get pummeled. And so, like, it works. Like, there's genuine chemistry between these various characters that helps the story to move along. And some of the things that also happen along the way progress it. I was like, wow, there's actually a plot, not just a concept of a
Hmm.
plot. So this is one that I definitely would recommend to people to check out. It might not be the best thing that premieres this season, but I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one. Another fun one that I'm looking forward to, Medaka Kuroiwa is impervious to my charms. This one, like, where I'm getting married to the girl I hate in my class fails completely at being a good rom-com. This one, like, wins. in my book. And that's mostly because you have like your own individual like characters with their own motivations going into this, and they're butting heads over it. They're having to deal with each other like over the top of this. Just kind of the setup, you have Medaka Kuroiwa, the namesake character, who is this like rural transplant into Tokyo who grew up like learning how to become a priest. And one of the things with becoming a priest is you're not supposed to interact with girls very much. Well, so he has no experience interacting with girls, but like his reaction to like any girls coming close to him is to recite scriptures in his head and to like put up a full-on poker face. So you've got Mona-chan, who like is used to being the center of the attention. She's she's basically like the one girl in Dandadan where like
Ira.
Ida, yeah, she's basically Ida, where she's like the center of attention and she's perfect and everybody gives her attention because of that. And then you have this one character who doesn't give her the attention that she believes is her right, and so she does everything she can to attract that attention. And so it's like you have these characters just interacting with each other, trying to survive each other in some form or another, and like everything Mona does to Medaka like backfires on her spectacularly. Like she tries so hard to break his poker face, and like he's actually attracted to her, but he's like trying so hard not to let it bother him to like get past the situation that like it doesn't come across at all.
Do not give into vile temptation, Medaka. Here's the thing. I know this is going to be a story that's going to get flack because of how it leans into its ecchi side, which, I mean, for some people, that's definitely going to be a turnoff. For others, that is the reason why they're going to watch it. The way that I'm going to approach my particular critique of it is that yes, it kind of goes a little bit more overboard than it ought to. However, at the same time, it could go a whole lot worse. But what I actually do enjoy about this is that it feels relatable, as weird as that sounds. And maybe that's just because my experiences in the wonderful world of dating is really weird. But like, I have met these kinds of people. I have met the girls and guys who throw themselves at someone else trying to get this other person's attention and watching it always backfire in some kind of spectacular way. And I have met those people who come from very uptight backgrounds who are all like, I am interested. I just don't know how to react. And so they react poorly, or they react in a way that comes across negative, whereas they actually think it's positive, and you get the drama. What I think, though, really helps elevate this story is not so much the back and forth between Medaka and Mona, but the side characters who begin to get involved. They really help elevate them because of the shenanigans that they bring to the story.
Yeah, I agree. This one's going to be a fun one. All right, let's move on to Ubel Blatt, which
Ich bin so satt, ich mag kein Blatt.
Which is a dark fantasy story that we know a lot of people are really looking forward to. You have, what's his name, Coinzel?
Yeah, Coinzel.
Coinzel, who is this like very Leaf elf-looking character who has this black sword and is taking out all these different bandits and supposed to look like this complete badass, and he's going after these like 4 betrayers, and you've got the 7 like spearmen, and there's a huge info dump at the start of this that like it is supposed to be there to set up this world, and it really just confuses people. And Lars and I both agree they tried to jump into the story a bit too soon. It's missing a lot of setup. I feel like it's really trying to be this epic fantasy, and the thing with epic fantasy that you need is time, and this is
Mhm.
trying to accelerate that time too fast. Lars has his own gripe with this though.
Yeah. Well, actually, to quickly touch about the whole thing about epic fantasy is that like some of the best epic fantasy that at least I know of. So when you look at Lord of the Rings, everyone remembers the info dump at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings movies. If you read the Lord of the Rings, you get thrown into it. Unless you have a copy of the book where it's all like, oh, here's a little bit of background history if you haven't read The Hobbit. But otherwise, you get thrown into the Lord of the Rings, and you have to learn on the go as things happen. Or from Brandon Sanderson senpai, if you read The Way of Kings, you know from this massive book that you just picked up that it's going to be epic, it's going to be full of stuff, and you are introduced to just these people have betrayed God? What's going on? The assassination of King Gavilar, who absolutely deserved to get killed. And then, boom, we get thrown into something else. And you're like, wait, what? And you have to learn as you read the book what's actually going on. And it takes its time. It absolutely takes its time to then fully introduce you to what the heck is going on. It hooks you and then teaches you. Ubel Blatt, unfortunately, really, really, really wants to be Berserk. And when you know what's all in Berserk, you can see that whoever made Ubel Blatt basically had a checklist of everything that Berserk has and put it into the story. Check, 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 check. You've got the Black Swordsman. You've got the elves. You have a dark atmosphere, a wide, expansive world. The hero was betrayed. You've got gratuitous violence. You've got gratuitous sex. You've got all of this stuff. But it doesn't feel like Berserk. And it also feels like the story isn't sure what it itself is actually supposed to be. And part of that is not only the info dump, but that it rushes the reveal of who Coinzel is. Whereas with something like Berserk, the Black Swordsman arc takes its time to introduce us to Guts and why we should care about this Berserker. Like he seems like an absolutely horrible person, but as you spend your time with Guts, you realize he's a human, and he's a human who's suffering. Coinzel, on the other hand, I would love to get to know who Coinzel is, but rather we are introduced to Coinzel's identity rather than his personality.
Yes.
And so by the end, by the time that we actually get to the reveal of who Coinzel really is, what do I know about Coinzel? He's a diminutive elf with a scar on his face. He likes to bang older women, and he can kill people with swords that come out of his back. And if you like that, fine, you like that. But that's not a good character when you compare it to someone like Guts. So,
well, and the world building is kind of sloppy because, like, we don't need to know everything, but like, I feel like it's all over the place. It's like, okay, there's magic spears, there's like people getting experimented on, crazy monsters based off of that. You've got like fairies and elves, and that leads to like certain power up moves, and it feels inconsistent. Like that's a major thing when you're writing a power system or like magic system, is you as the author have to know what the rules are. You don't have to share that with the readers, but you have to have a very solid and set rule base. If you get really loosey goosey with that, like what's the point? Like your magic system's just going to fall apart. And with like an epic fantasy that relies on a lot of that kind of stuff, your story's going to fall apart with it.
If you don't mind me quickly giving an example of this from my own writing. So when I was writing my book, Knights of Halicruise, I made a mistake that was really big. And I'm happy that I managed to get rid of that, like fix that mistake before I actually published the book. But I figured out my mistake while I was writing the second book. And it was that one of the major rules of the world of Halicruise is that no one is able to teleport. teleportation magic exists, but it's blocked until way later. And so for people then to actually basically create a version of teleportation, they have to get very creative and they have to know their stuff. But you can't just simply teleport, even though that magic does exist. However, in the book, when I first wrote it, like even a few drafts in, I just had at one point an army teleporting into a hill to then have like this really amazing surprise attack where the hill was going to like blow up and they would then charge into the city, and it was a really cool scene. But then realized, oh my gosh, I can't do this scene because teleportation magic is blocked. And that's because it's a big deal in the second book when one of the characters gets kidnapped and the others have to chase after him. It would be so easy to teleport, but they can't. And so that's a huge hindrance in the hunt to get him back. So because I was writing this, I realized, oh my gosh, I made a mistake, and I had to go back and fix what was there in Knights of Halicruise. So it is very important that you get your rules consistent, because people will pick up on it, and when the inconsistencies are there, people will forgive one or two things that you get wrong. But when it's a big thing that you get wrong, or when the magic just ceases to make sense, people check out. And I agree with Scott that you have something like that happening here with Ubel Blatt, that it's very unclear what's going on. And it seems like all of the explanation that was given for the world building could have been should have been strung out. And some of the pages dedicated to history could have been and should have been dedicated to magic to help us understand Coinzel and what he's able to do.
Yeah, you can do an info dump at the start of the story. I'm not as bothered by that as other people are, but it has to be the right kind of information for that part of the story. And so if you're doing it to set up like the initial building blocks of your world, that's perfect. But if you're showing a bit too much of your hand right away, then like, why write the story? So
I still feel like Ubel Blatt is going to be one that a lot of the dark fantasy fans are going to stream to, because it's been a while since we've actually had like a good medieval dark fantasy. Like, yes, there's ReZero, but ReZero is kind of doing its own thing. It breaks a lot of the expectations and rules. This is far more within the vein of something like Berserk, which there's been a cry for, there's been a demand for. So I think people will still enjoy Ubel Blatt because it kind of fills that niche, but it's not the great story that some people might claim it is, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, and then on to more of a fantasy story that we both really enjoyed. And this is From Bureaucrat to Villainess. Dad's been reincarnated, which is so fun. So, like, going into it, this is a parody of the Villainous isekai, like, kind of setup. Like, it's making a fun of a lot of the stuff in that subgenre, but it does it so well. It like becomes its own like standalone story, and it's just so much fun. Basically, you've got this like 50-year-old, like, oh, what is he? He's just a salaryman. He like works in some company, and like he's like this old otaku dad at the same time, and he gets hit by Truck-kun and reincarnated as this snooty Duke's daughter, and like the dad's kind of in control, but like the Duke's daughter's mannerisms come out at the same time, and so you end up with this like really nice like royal like noble lady who's like trying to pretend to be the villainess and failing completely at it, and it's so much fun.
Something that just right now occurred to me is Rob, like how he's the otaku dad and everything. Can we just give it up for the fact that this guy has this guy has cared enough about his daughter and her interest that he's watched her play her game, that he then realizes, oh, I am in this game. And he knows at least enough about what's happening because he's spent time with his daughter as she's played the game. This is a good dad.
Mm-hmm. Like he actually paying attention to what his daughter's interested in, and like that's where the like title "Dad's been reincarnated." Well, the daughter's at home able to see like the game start playing by itself, and then she realizes based off the actions of the villainous character that, oh no, that's Dad. Like it can't be anybody but him based off of how they're acting. Which is
and
so much
and
fun.
oh, it is. And one of the things I love about this is how, like, at one point he's like, oh, I need to act like her because I'm in the game and I shouldn't screw it on up. But he reverts immediately to how he's supposed to act in his day job, with the niceties, with the insights, with how he defers to people. And so rather than being the snooty, self-absorbed villainous, he ends up becoming very agreeable, very kind, very
Mm-hmm.
helpful. And that's just what's been ingrained into him. Like, he's been thoroughly molded by the Japanese workspace, which is often viewed as a very negative thing, but in this case it ends up being played up for laughs. And
Yep.
it's great.
Well, and part of the thing, and like it's leaning into kind of like a Yuri sentiment here, but like he's trying to figure out like, okay, we have the main character who like could get with any of these guys, and that's going to change my life depending on what happens there. I need to figure out who she's interested in, and like because like they're actually so nice to the main character, they end up tripping all these like romance flags that end up turning the main character to look at the villainous instead of the capture targets. And but like completely unwittingly, like not even on purpose.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. That's really what I can just say for this. This is going to be a fun one to watch, and really, like, if you just need a good laugh, this one will provide you, I think, with good laughs. And it doesn't need. This is one that doesn't even need to be very strong in terms of how well it's animated. It just needs to get the jokes to land. Like, this was funny to read, and I bet it's going to be funny to watch.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. This one's definitely a must watch for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I
So
love this subgenre in the first place because it does a very good job of focusing on the characters and the world the characters are in instead of focusing on like the fighting and the power system. So I'm really excited to see this. Biggest surprise for this one for me wasn't the story, it was the author of the story. When I found out the author of the story was the one who created Zoids in the first place, like complete shock. Like complete difference between what Zoids was and what this is. And it's just like, okay, like wasn't ready for that, but that's awesome.
oh boy, I have to agree with that. And you know what? Let me just all say to that it's neat to get to see someone who made something big in the late '90s, early 2000s, come back with something fresh over 20 years later,
Yes.
and get their manga adapted into an anime. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
And just as an author, like, it's something that, and also as a content creator here on YouTube, there is a fear that eventually you'll just cease to be relevant. Like, you've
Oh
had
yeah.
your heyday. How many times have people said something like that for so let's see here, like J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling still writes and creates, but her heyday was Harry Potter. And then everyone just cares about the original Harry Potter. Who cares what else she's working on? And Stephen King. Stephen King was amazing back when he was just snorting coke and writing insane stuff, and now he's just an old tired author who maybe should hang up his cape. And cape, like, that's what people would think, and that's kind of the stereotype that we consider, that artists have their day and then no more. Here we have an experienced author, an experienced mangaka
Hmm.
coming back and just having a blast.
Yeah,
with a story that
exactly.
they want to tell. I love that.
I fully agree. I'm so excited to see this animated. This one's so much fun.
Yeah. So we've got some. So there are some good ones here in this season. As as you brought up earlier, Scott. Like winter doesn't always seem to have the real heavy hitters. That's relegated for later in the year, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some good ones
Exactly.
this season.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah, I fully do intend to watch My Happy Marriage, uh, and definitely we're going to do Apothecary Diaries. I'm going to give lemon honey soda a try,
Hmm.
and Guild Receptionist. I will watch Ubel Blotts
Just to tear into it.
to a certain extent, maybe to tear into it. I want to see how it's adapted
Okay.
because the adaptation could really improve on the source material.
Yeah,
So
I can see that.
we'll see how it goes, and I think it would be neat to do a comparison depending on how it does between its opening and Berserk's opening,
Hmm.
just to show like okay, like not that Berserk is the pinnacle of how you should open up a story, because that's an intense opening chapter, but this is a way to have an opening chapter that introduces the audience to everything that is going to be important without
Hmm.
giving stuff away. It would be, I think, a good view. So we'll just see how it's adapted. So there's a lot to watch.
There's a lot to watch. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. I'm probably gonna watch Sakamoto Days, at least watch some of the clips for Sakamoto Days. I think that's gonna be fun. Honey Lemon Soda, I want to give a try. Um, and then Medaka Kuroiwa is impervious to my charms. And then definitely from Bureaucrat to Villainous, definitely that one.
Yes.
And then of
So much
course
good stuff.
Apothecary Diaries, just because I love Apothecary Diaries.
Yep. And again, if for anyone who has made it this far into the video, congratulations. And remember, we will be hiding frogs in the Apothecary Diaries videos. Find the correct number of frogs, earn yourself a frog from Camille.
Well, this has been a good episode.
Yeah, it's been fun. And so if you guys have found this video informative, fun, and the likes, then please leave a like, a comment if you will, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. But if you'd especially like to help us out, then please check out the books that we have published. The links for them are in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible weeb-infested adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, choose.
Okini.